I wasn't expecting to get a straight answer when I asked. I've asked employees plenty of vague questions before, and mostly gotten shrugs, or a polite, "I'm not sure, that's more of a corporate thing." But this time, I caught a store manager during a genuinely quiet stretch on a weekday afternoon, and when I asked why an entire section of the food aisle looked like it was being cleared out early, she actually sat down with me for a few minutes and explained it properly. What she told me is that this store runs on a quarterly supply cycle, and September 1st is one of those reset dates, a point where a whole batch of supplier agreements either renew or quietly end. 14 specific food items she personally confirmed are on the ending side of that list this time around. Some for pricing reasons, some for seasonal reasons, a couple for reasons that genuinely surprised me. I'm going through every single one of them today, in the order she walked me through them, so you know exactly what to grab before that date hits. Before I get into the list, if this kind of behind-the-scenes information is useful to you, hit subscribe now, because I'm planning to check back in on the next reset cycle to see what changes again, and you won't want to miss that follow-up. Stick around till the end too, because the last item on this list is the one she specifically told me to grab immediately, not to wait even a few days on. I want to mention up front that I'm not naming the specific location or the manager by name, out of respect for her willingness to actually talk to me honestly instead of giving me a corporate non-answer. But everything she told me lines up with patterns I've heard about from other employees at different locations too, which makes me fairly confident this reset cycle is a genuine, real thing happening across more than just her one store. Number 1. Canned corn, a specific brand carried at $1 item each. The manager explained this one is a straightforward pricing issue. The supplier's cost per case is rising starting with the next quarterly order cycle, and rather than raising the shelf price above the dollar point, the store is simply not renewing that specific line. A different canned corn will likely take its place eventually, but this exact one, this exact price, ends after September 1st. If canned corn is a pantry staple in your house, the way it is in a lot of households, grabbing several cans now, while the current price and supplier are still in place, is the simple move here. She mentioned corn specifically is one of the higher volume items in that entire section, so once the current stock clears out, she genuinely expects a noticeable gap on the shelf before any replacement product arrives. Up next is a vegetable that's apparently been having supply chain issues for months already. Number 2. Canned green beans. This one had a slightly different story behind it. According to the manager, the supplier has had inconsistent fulfillment for the past couple of quarters, sometimes shipping less than what was ordered, and the store made the call to drop that specific supplier relationship rather than keep dealing with unreliable restocking. A replacement green bean product is expected eventually, but there will likely be a gap between when this one runs out and when a new one arrives, meaning shelves could sit empty for a stretch rather than a clean, instant swap. If your family goes through green beans regularly, this is one where stocking up matters slightly more than usual, simply because of that expected gap. She actually seemed a little frustrated, explaining this one specifically, mentioning that inconsistent supplier fulfillment is one of the more annoying parts of her job, since it means dealing with confused, frustrated customers over something entirely outside her own control at the store level. Moving on to a breakfast staple that a lot of people specifically asked me about before I even started digging into this. Number 3. Individual instant oatmeal packets, sold in a multi-pack. The manager mentioned this one is being discontinued specifically because the manufacturer is shifting to a new packaging size that no longer fits this store's specific pricing model, similar to a pattern I've heard about with other products before. The new packaging, once it eventually arrives elsewhere, will apparently come at a higher price point that doesn't work for a store built around holding firm, low prices. For anyone who relies on these for quick breakfasts, especially for kids getting ready for school in the morning, this is genuinely one of the more disruptive items on this list to lose, given how often a staple like this gets used week to week. She mentioned this specific packaging size has been sold at this store for years without any changes, which made the timing of this particular switch feel a little more noticeable to her than some of the other, quieter changes on this list. The next item is a soup that apparently sells extremely well, which made its disappearance the most confusing one to hear about. Number 4. Canned chicken noodle soup. This is the one that genuinely surprised the manager herself when she found out, since she mentioned it's consistently one of the better-selling canned soups at her specific location. The reason, according to what she was told, comes down to a licensing change with the specific soup brand rather than anything about how well it's actually selling, similar to a pattern where a business agreement ends independent of a product's actual popularity on the shelf. A different soup brand is expected to fill that spot, but if this exact version is a household favorite, the current stock is genuinely all that's left of it. She actually double-checked the sales numbers on her own tablet while we were talking, almost as if she wanted to confirm for herself that she wasn't misremembering, and confirmed it really has been outselling several other soup varieties on that same shelf right up until this announcement came through. Up next is a pantry staple that apparently every single parent I've talked to has strong feelings about. Number 5. Boxed macaroni and cheese. According to the manager, this one is being dropped due to a straightforward cost increase from the manufacturer that pushes it above the dollar price point, starting with the next order cycle. She mentioned this is one of the highest volume items in the entire food section at her store, meaning the shelf gap once current stock runs out is likely to be very noticeable to regular shoppers. If boxed mac and cheese is a weekly staple in your house, this is genuinely one of the higher priority items on this entire list to stock up on before the date hits. She specifically mentioned watching the shelf get restocked multiple times a week for this exact item, more frequently than almost anything else in that entire aisle, which makes the size of the gap once it's gone feel especially significant compared to slower-moving products on the same shelf. The next item is a pantry protein that's apparently facing the exact same pricing pressure. Number 6. Canned tuna. The manager explained this one is being affected by broader seafood pricing increases across the entire supply chain, not something specific to this one store or supplier, meaning canned tuna prices are likely rising pretty broadly regardless of where you shop. For this specific store, that means the current dollar price point for this exact product simply won't be sustainable after the upcoming order cycle. If tuna is part of your regular meal rotation, this is worth grabbing several cans of now, since the price increase is coming from further up the supply chain rather than being something isolated to this particular retailer alone. She mentioned this is one of those situations where even a store this size, buying in genuine bulk, simply doesn't have enough leverage to hold a price point when the entire industry it's sourcing from is shifting at once, regardless of how loyal any single supplier relationship might otherwise be. Moving on to a lunch staple that disappeared for a genuinely unusual reason. Number 7. Individual fruit cups, sold in multi-packs. This one, according to the manager, is being discontinued because the manufacturer is discontinuing that specific fruit variety entirely across all their retail partners, not just this one store. Apparently, a different fruit combination will eventually replace it, but the exact blend currently on shelves simply won't exist anywhere once current stock sells through. For anyone packing lunches regularly, especially for kids, this is one where the current product genuinely won't have a direct replacement, just a different variety, filling roughly the same shelf spot eventually. She mentioned this specific fruit blend has actually been requested by name from a few regular customers over the past several months, making it one of the small handful of items on this list where she genuinely expects some disappointed reactions once people notice it's gone. The next item is a canned bean that a lot of people specifically use for quick, hearty meals. Number 8. Canned baked beans. The manager mentioned this one is facing the same kind of pricing pressure as several other items on this list, with the supplier's cost increase pushing it past what the store's price point can absorb starting after the reset date. She noted this is one of the items customers ask about most once it's actually gone, since it's a specific, distinct product that doesn't have an obvious identical substitute waiting in the wings. If baked beans are part of your regular pantry rotation, grabbing extra now is the straightforward move here. She mentioned that unlike some of the other pricing-related items on this list, this specific supplier hasn't offered any indication of returning at a later date with an adjusted price, meaning this particular product feels more permanently gone than a few of the others we discussed, which are at least expected to eventually return in some updated form. Up next is a breakfast cereal with a slightly different story behind its departure. Number 9. A specific brand of breakfast cereal. According to the manager, this one is leaving due to a seasonal packaging change from the manufacturer, similar to what happened with the oatmeal packets earlier on this list. The company is shifting to updated box sizing that doesn't fit this store's current shelf planogram or price point, and rather than redesign shelf space around the new packaging, The store is simply letting current stock be the last of it. A different cereal option will likely take its place, but this specific box, in this specific size, is genuinely ending. She mentioned cereal packaging changes like this one tend to happen fairly regularly across the industry, often tied to manufacturers trying to reduce shipping costs or shelf footprint, changes that ripple down to smaller value retailers like this one, in ways that rarely get any public attention at all. The next item is a canned meal that college students and busy families specifically stock up on. Number 10. Canned chili. This one is facing the same broad pricing pressure affecting several other canned goods on this list, according to the manager, with rising ingredient and packaging costs from the supplier, pushing it beyond the sustainable price point after the upcoming reset. She mentioned this is one of the items she personally buys for her own household and confirmed she's already stocked up several cans for herself once she found out it was on the list. If a quick, hearty canned meal like this is part of your routine, following her lead and grabbing extra now is a reasonable move. Watching her mention buying it for her own family made this one of the moments during our conversation where it felt less like an employee reciting a policy and more like a genuine person navigating the exact same disappointing shelf changes as everyone else who shops there regularly. Moving on to a pantry staple that almost every single household has some version of. Number 11. A jar of peanut butter. According to the manager, this one is being discontinued due to a supplier contract simply not being renewed. A purely business-side decision rather than anything about demand or performance, similar to a pattern that's come up with a few other items over time. A different peanut butter brand is expected to fill the shelf space, but the current jar, at the current price, won't be around after the reset date. For a staple this commonly used across so many households, this is genuinely one of the more significant items on this entire list to stock up on while you still can. She mentioned peanut butter specifically is one of the items she gets the most questions about from customers already, even before this particular change, since it's exactly the kind of everyday staple people notice immediately the moment it's not sitting in its usual spot. The next item is a simple pantry basic that's apparently facing a straightforward cost squeeze. Number 12. A box of saltine crackers. The manager explained this one is being dropped due to a wheat and packaging cost increase from the supplier that pushes it above the current price point, starting with the next order cycle. It's a small, unglamorous item, but a genuinely useful pantry basic for soups, snacking, and general cooking, and losing access to it at this specific price point is exactly the kind of quiet loss that tends to go unnoticed until you actually reach for the shelf and it's simply not there anymore. She mentioned this is honestly one of the items she expects the fewest complaints about, specifically, not because people won't notice, but because it's cheap and unremarkable enough that most people will probably just grab whatever replacement ends up in that spot without thinking twice about it. Up next is a canned meal that's apparently been a consistent favorite among the store's regular shoppers. Number 13. Canned ravioli. According to the manager, this one is facing the same kind of licensing and supplier shift affecting the chicken noodle soup earlier on this list, an agreement ending independent of how well the product has actually been selling. She specifically mentioned this as one that regular customers, particularly parents of younger kids, ask about constantly, a genuinely popular, easy meal option that's ending for reasons that have nothing to do with anyone losing interest in it. If this is a regular meal in your household rotation, the current stock is worth grabbing while it's still there. She actually laughed a little, describing how often kids specifically request this exact item during a shopping trip, mentioning it's one of the few canned goods she regularly sees parents grab multiples of in a single visit, almost treating it more like a favorite snack than an ordinary pantry item. And finally, the item she specifically told me to grab immediately, not to wait even a few days on. Number 14. Canned sliced peaches. This is the one where her tone genuinely shifted while explaining it to me. According to what she was told, this specific canned fruit is facing an unusually short supply window, with the remaining warehouse stock already lower than most of the other items on this list, meaning it could realistically sell out at her specific location well before the September 1st date even arrives, rather than lasting right up until the cutoff the way most of the other items on this list likely will. She told me directly that if there's one single item on this entire list worth prioritizing over all the others, it's this one, specifically because the timeline on it is genuinely uncertain and could end sooner than expected rather than holding steady until the actual reset date. I actually asked her directly how much stock was left at that specific moment, and she wasn't able to give me an exact number, but her honest guess was that it likely wouldn't last more than another week or two at the current rate shoppers were buying it, well before September 1st even arrives. That uncertainty is exactly why this one earned the top mention at the end of this list, rather than being treated the same as the other 13 items, all of which she was fairly confident would last steadily right up until the actual cutoff date itself. So that's the full list, 14 food items a store manager personally walked me through, all set to disappear after September 1st, for reasons ranging from straightforward pricing pressure to licensing agreements ending, to manufacturers shifting packaging sizes entirely outside anyone's control at the store level. If you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. If any of these 14 items are part of your regular routine, this is genuinely the window to stock up before that date hits, especially on the canned peaches, given how much sooner that one specific item could realistically run out. Quickly, if you haven't hit subscribe yet from earlier in this video, now's a good moment, since everything from here on out is really about making sure you actually see the follow-up when it comes. Before you go, I'd genuinely love to know which of these 14 surprised you the most. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me figure out which items to dig deeper into next time I catch an employee willing to talk. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I'm planning to follow up on this exact list once the new quarterly cycle actually hits, to show you exactly what replaces each of these 14 items, and whether any of the replacements are actually worth grabbing. That follow-up video is going to depend entirely on this one doing well, so if you found this useful, a like on your way out genuinely helps more than you'd think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. One more thing before you go. If you're new here, this channel is entirely built around exactly this kind of conversation: real employees, real store-level details, the stuff you genuinely can't find anywhere else because it never makes it into any official announcement. I don't have insider access to some corporate database. Everything I share comes from actual conversations like this one, which means the more of you watching and commenting with your own local experiences, the better and more complete this kind of coverage becomes over time. If you've noticed something similar at your own local store, a product quietly disappearing, a shelf gap nobody's explained, drop that in the comments too, since it genuinely helps me know what to specifically ask about next time I get a manager willing to talk. Every single video like this one starts from exactly that kind of small, curious question, so the community piece of this genuinely matters more than it might seem from the outside. I'll be back soon with more of these behind-the-scenes conversations, and I hope you'll be here for the follow-up once this specific reset cycle actually plays out in September.